All right, if we could get started with this session. My name again is Jim Riddle, and I'll be moderating this session this afternoon. And the session is Organic Research and International Perspective. And we're going to go in a different order than the way they're listed in your program. And we're going to start with Marc, and I'll let you, Marc, introduce yourself so I don't butcher your last name. Marc's from the French National Institute of Agricultural Research, and he'll be speaking on research and development integration to foster organic farming in France. And before Marc begins, I just want to point out that the abstracts of all talks as well as speaker bios are there when you registered. So if you want to learn more about all of our speakers, that's the place to look. So we'll get on with the program. Marc, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, thanks. Take it away, and please introduce yourself.
Okay, so I'm Marc Tchamitchian, because you didn't take the chance to pronounce my name, so I'll do it for you. But no matter, I thank you very much, first for the invitation, and second for modifying the timetable so that I will not go to bed too late. It's about 20 to 11 in France in the night, so thank you very much again. My presentation aims at proposing two different things. I will start by an overview of the dynamics that led to the current structure of the French research and dissemination or research and development system, and comparing the conventional agriculture side and organic farming dedicated organization. And if I do so, it is because I want to sustain the idea that organic farming faced difficulties to develop itself, but probably is today, because of these dynamics that I'll show by the end of my presentation, is probably at a place today to take over and become much more influent and probably be able to develop itself much faster. So I will, if you can move to the second slide, please. The flow of my presentation will then be to show how the research and development organization built in France since the 50s after the Second World War, and then do the same thing for the organic farming systems. And I will then try to compare those two dynamics and also the concerns or the goals that those two systems try to address, and show what is the situation today, which will lead me to my conclusions. So next slide, please. We should be on slide number 3. So after the Second World War, well, the situation is well known. The world has difficulties to feed itself. And so France organized itself to try to address this problem of feeding its population. Before the war, dissemination and research was mainly achieved in agricultural schools, which were placed in different locations in France. After the Second World War, the government decided on a very linear scheme. First, it created the INRA, that is the French Organization for Agricultural Research, to which I belong today. It was created in 1946, and it was based on regional sites, which explains probably why today still many of the INRA locations have specialties, either for animal breeding or for plant breeding, for example, etc. And the mission that the government gave to INRA in 1946 was to carry out all kinds of researches dedicated to enhance the profitability of techniques and farming systems. So all words are important: profitability, techniques, and farming systems. And INRA was structured by governmental driving according to scientific domains. So animal and plants were separated, breeding and farming was separated, economy was apart, etc. So a rather vertical and closed system in which disciplines was not, how shall we say, did not talk to each other much. And at the same time, the state, the government, established what we call Institut Technique, that is extension services. And those extension services, the first were created before the war, the Second World War, and the last was created in the 70s. So you see it's a continuous history. Those extension services was created by sector, so they were dedicated to specific production, grains, one for grains, one for maize, one for poultry, one for cows, etc. And their mission was to produce references and to disseminate techniques. So as you see in the missions of the Institut Technique, of the extension services, the word farming systems disappear. Aside from those governmental agencies, there were many other actors that were active in disseminating and supporting farming activities. Some were farmers supported, and others were government supported, which created some sort of conflict in the 60s, and that was a very tense period for farmers, because they were either at the same time they were submitted to some sort of pressure from the government to follow a given development scheme, and they had their own idea about where to go in conventional agriculture, I mean. Maybe I forgot to ask you to go forward in slide 3. And I will now move to slide 4. I'll try to be more precise in the different movements of the slide. So on slide 4, what you see is a tentative scheme to represent this organization of the French R&D system for conventional agriculture. So you can see first the vertical idea that the government had from research to farmers going through extension services, that is technical, what we call Institut Technique in France, and to dissemination. This mission was given to agricultural schools, to agricultural colleges, and to some farmers' associations. Can you move one step forward, please? To support those missions, all those organizations, from research to dissemination, could use experimentation, and there was something like 60 farms run by the research organization, by INRA, about 80 farms run by extension services, and the dissemination, the agricultural schools also had their farms. So experimentation was also one key element in the structure of the system, but it was run by each of the different organizations, from research to dissemination, apart one from each other. A farm never belonged to many or to at least 2 of those services. If you could move one step forward, all this system was trying to give the farmers techniques or technical packages to help them produce better, to enhance their profitability. That was the mission of the system, and that was completely in line with the objective of commercial firms that were selling fertilizers, selling pesticides, or selling new plant breeds or new animal breeds, for example. That's why I call it a converging system onto the farmers. And the only element, if you could move one step forward in the slide, please. We should still be on slide 4. The only element where information were exchanged and not only translated from one point to the other in one direction only was the Farmers Association, the CETA, which was some sort of small associations of farmers enrolling an expert, an advisor, and trying to help them enhance their practices, enhance the system. That was the only place where information were going to and from. Next slide, please. In the 90s, this system had some modification, not in its structure, but in its goals. The goal, the mission of the system was no more to disseminate only, we should be on slide 5, not only to disseminate techniques, but it was also to, if you could move one step, 1999 should appear, it was also take into account sustainability in agriculture, environment, multiple functions of agriculture, so introducing new goals within the same system. And one key element to put these new goals in action was to induce a technical changes in the farm, at the farm level, which was something new because up to now the system was dedicated to developing techniques and not farming systems. And the main element that was put forward by the government was agri-environmental measures. That is, contract with farmers to change their practices so that they would both produce and preserve environment. If you could move one step ahead, slide 6. During the same period, of course, organic farming started to develop in France. The first organic farm reported in France is dated from 1938, I have a good memory. And after the Second World War, the first thing that appeared is, about 10 years later, 1958, the first Organic Farmers Association devoted to organic farming development. Those kinds of associations multiplied themselves, first in the first 10 following years slowly, but later faster. But they also envisioned different, or they were also supporting different vision of organic farming. They were supporting different trends and different views of what organic farming was. And there was no public policy and no public position about what organic farming is. For example, different agricultural laws that were promoted during this period until 1978 never mentioned the word organic farming or something approaching. If you could move one step ahead, please. Thank you. The next period could be called the youth of organic farming in France. The previous one could be infancy. During this youth, what appears is some sort of convergence, or at least the recognition that the different streams of organic farming should at least federate themselves to be able to represent a greater strength and to be able to promote organic farming as a whole. But in that period, we can also see that two important structures appear. First, it's the Federation of Organic Farming Movements in France, the FNAB, which Stéphane mentioned earlier. And the second is the ITAB, that is an association devoted to experimentation at the service of organic farming, called ITAB, Institut Technique for Organic Farming. It is called Institut Technique, but it didn't have the official recognition of the government at that time. And in 1998, what is interesting is that the standards for organic farming products was unified, and certification was also defined by a law from the French government. The last period, if you could move one step ahead, please, could be called the maturity of organic farming in France. It's the current period, starting at about 2000. First of all, the research recognizes organic farming as an object of interest. 2000 is the year in which INRA creates its own body for organic farming research called the Internal Committee for Organic Farming. And in the years that follows, France has several governmental plans dedicated to development of organic farming with financial support. And finally, 2 years ago, in 2012, the ITAB, that is the Institut Technique for Organic Farming, gains official recognition and gains the qualification of Institut Technique, that is, joins the other 14 Institut Technique of France, the other 14 that was specialized by branches, by production sector. If you could move one step ahead, that should be slide number 7. It's a complicated one. There will be several steps in it. So if you could move just one step, I've tried to organize on this slide the different steps in time of the operation of those different structures, and comparing also in black what belongs to conventional and conventional agriculture, and in green to what belongs to organic farming. On the upper part of the slide, you will see the different bodies that come from or that derive from the intention of the government, and at the lower part of the slide you will see the bodies, the structures that will be created at the initiative of farmers. So as you can see, INRA was created at the start of this period, 1946, and Farmers Association 2, and they still exist, just like INRA. If you could move one step ahead. Then the government tried to institute the bodies dedicated to experimentation at the support to the different sector of production, and they also create a special coordination system for those technical institutes. Just one step ahead again, and they also create other government agencies, local agencies mainly, that are closer to farmers, the role of which is to advise the farmer, but also to hand out the message and to hand out the techniques that are developed by the research and by the technical institutes. If you can move one step ahead, you should see appear in 1978 the first mention of organic farming in an agricultural law, and in 1988 the unique definition of organic farming standards, because before that period, as I said, there were several of them. At the same time, or just a little earlier, next step please, I4M was created after a meeting held in France, by the way, in Versailles. And if you could move one step ahead, after I4M appears this experimentation dedicated technical institute, ITAB, at the initiative of farmers. And if you could move 1, 2, and 3 steps ahead, please. In the recent period, what you see is the recognition of organic farming in research and in experimentation. And finally, the idea that this slide gives is that governmental framing, that is, the view of the government over agriculture, has maintained itself all over time and has tried to maintain this linear scheme going from research to farmers. And during this same period, what happened for organic farming is that its own dynamics, that's why I call it self-nurturing, its own dynamics brought organic farming onto a recognition at the governmental level. If you could move to the next slide, which should be slide 8. What I try to highlight here is the fact that during this period, the goals of the two systems finally converges, at least in the words, in the mission that were given to them. That is, from farming techniques to farming systems, which is today the motto. Environmental health and health concerns grow up in both systems, and of course, the multiple functions, the multiple roles of agriculture is recognized also for conventional agriculture. And if you can move to the one step ahead, please. Not only the goals are converging, but also there is a convergence in the system. That is, organic farming started from farmers' initiative and went today to a system in which governmental support is obtained, and also governmental planning is trying to put order in this system. So we could say that organic farming has institutionalized itself. Next slide, please, number 9. If we look closer, okay, words say, at least for the goals, that there is some sort of convergence, but in reality, what happens in conventional agriculture is that the measures taken by the government, and especially the environmental measures, try to target techniques and not farming systems to protect environment and at the same time maintain profitability. And when we analyze the effect of those measures, of those environmental measures, The result is that sustainability is not balanced on these three pillars. The economical pillar is, of course, well preserved. Environment is a little taken into account, and the social aspect of sustainability is generally a failure. One good example, for example, is the recent failure of the pesticide reduction plan, which very well shows that it is very difficult to change agriculture and really take into account those health and environmental concerns. So farming techniques design still prevail, although the word system is trying to get into the concerns and into the development of conventional agriculture. Organic farming during this period really took into account environment, you know all this, and also has a systemic design in view. So as you can see, although the words are the same, the convergence is not real. Next step, please. And there is also a difference in the system convergence, because on the 15 institute techniques that exist in France, we have one which is dedicated to organic farming and covers all production systems, whether animal or vegetal. And we have 14 other technical institutes that cover each one production sector and therefore has no integrated view of what a farm could be. Next slide, please. What I'll try to do now is to show, or at least to state, how the organic farming movement in France tried to find some support, at least within Europe. Europe has been instrumental in the transformation of agriculture in Europe through its common agricultural policy and through the funding of research and education on one side and through the funding of the development of rural territories on the other side. Next step, please. And very soon, Organic Farming Association recognized the need to bring Europe to support organic farming, and there are different bodies to do so, which are listed on the slide. Just next step, please. But those bodies are not very well represented by the French, or do not include a good representation of the French organization. Although stakeholders and representatives of the French organic farming systems are in I4M, but they are not very influential, at least in the Europe programming today. Next slide, please. I'm moving to my conclusions. So the first thing is that comes from this presentation to me is that there are some weaknesses of the French system to develop agriculture and organic farming especially. First of all, concerning conventional agriculture, the R&D system is very specialized by production type. It's in line with the vision and goals of the agro-industry, so it's mainly an economical view that prevails, and it's very efficient, but it is efficient for a procedural management and for a technology transfer that goes only one way, from research to the farmers. So there is very little consideration of the farmer's point of view. Next step, please. And the weaknesses for the organic farming sector during the same period was that it was enrolled in a systemic view, which could be seen as an advantage, but at the beginning of research and development, this is a very difficult thing to encompass, so I see it as a weakness at that period. And it was also imprisoned in a niche system, meaning that it had only little support and little recognition. It was efficiently organized, but it was organized for local management and local initiatives, so it was organized to recognize diversity, as Stefan mentioned earlier today. And another weakness that appears with the movement of today is that its increasing integration in the system place it in a position of being diluted or to be more in competition with classical systems. Next slide, please. But at the same time, this increasing integration in the system for me is, on the contrary, an opportunity for organic farming. I will quote a very famous political leader from the 18th and 19th century in France, Talleyrand, who said the best way to bring down a government is to be part of it. And today, organic farming is finally in the government, I would say. So it's ready to bring it down and to change it and to redesign it to its own view. So I think that organic farming is gaining momentum, both in experimental coordination and also in its access to resources for research, resources for development. And also, I think that this recognition will probably lower the level of resistance of the researchers themselves to convert to research on organic farming. And the second interesting thing, if you can move one step forward in this slide, is that it is broadening its view. The French organic farming movement is trying to set up a technology platform that is its own body to be influential in the European programming about organic farming, and which is why it's joining the technology platform called Organics to promote its research agenda. So next slide, please. My final conclusion is that organic farming system in France, research and development system in France, is really at a crossroads. What is its systemic view is both a weakness because it means a very large effort on research and development, but at the same time it is a general concern today for agriculture, so it puts it in, it is also an opportunity, an asset, and I think that the scene today is set for a much larger development of organic farming if it's able to seize the occasion. I thank you very much for your attention.
Merci, Marc, and thank you for your insights and for staying up to join us. Are there any questions for Marc? Yes, Kathleen.
Merci, Marc. I wanted to ask about how these changes are taking place on the EU level. You mentioned the Common Agricultural Policy is now supporting organic in a bigger way. Did that change occur because of change in politicians, i.e. are there more folks from the Green Party, for example, that are helping to facilitate this connection to organics?
Well, I can't really say. I haven't studied the question with this point of view. I'm looking at Aurélie when she doesn't seem to have an answer to. I think that several things are bringing Europe towards a better support to organic farming. First of all, I would say organic farming, by its goals, is addressing public concerns that Europe is trying to seize too. So there is a convergence in goals. Second, I think that when Europe started to recognize organic farming in the 80s, if I remember well, the first regulation on organic farming at the European level is from 1991. It was a period where organic farming, at least in Germany, Austria, Italy, was well developed, at least at the scale of organic farming, which meant that it had some economic weight, and therefore it was able to lobby by the European Union and to be recognized as such. But that's a very personal response, not an analysis.
If not, thank you very much again for joining us.